And nobody knows better than income inequality than the farm worker. Farm workers feed America and the world. They pick the crops that are sold to big restaurant chains and large food and tobacco corporations. These companies make billions every year, but farm workers are paid just measly wages, housed in smaller labor camps, and are retaliated against if they dare to speak out against abuses. Now, we need a president who's going to be on the side of the farm workers and the auto workers, the fast food workers, the factory workers. And not the billionaires. People like you who make this country run with your hard work. But due to the greed of Wall Street, receive so little in return. No one has fought harder for working people and the right for workers to organize and make jobs better than our own Bernie Sanders. That's why I'm proud to support Bernie Sanders for president, and I stand with Bernie because Bernie stands with us. A true warrior for working people, Representative Marcy Kaptur, has been fighting for the people of Toledo for more than 30 years. She stood up to the big banks when they were stealing people's homes. She has stood up against Wall Street and the strongest opponent to trade deals that have destroyed communities and shipped good jobs overseas. Toledoans, join me in giving Marcy Kaptur a great Toledo welcome.
And we want it to be a country for all, not just the privileged few. And I want to thank all those who preceded me on the program today. State Senator Nina Turner, whose passion and energy for real change is always evident. And my esteemed colleague from Hawaii, Representative Tulsi Gabbard, Washington, D.C. And my dear friend Valdemar, with whom it has been an honor to fight for over 3 decades for economic fairness and justice for all. I was reminded that Valdemar and I, with the age of some of the younger people in the front rows here, we were boycotting grapes with Cesar Chavez. In Brook Park, Ohio, which is in the 9th Congressional District. And just over 10 years ago, 14 members of that unit in one of the worst engagements in Iraq lost 14 of their members, along with 26 others who were killed from other parts of our country, and over 200 wounded. We remember them as we fight for our country in a different way, and we are forever indebted to them. I come here to introduce the next President of the United States.
One of the great political leaders here in the state of Ohio. Nina, thank you so much. And let me thank Kristen Robideau on our staff, David Ames from the UAW, thank you so much, Mike Futrell. Let me thank Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard for being here. Active in the labor movement. And lastly, let me thank all of you for doing a real service for the American people. I have known Marcy for decades, and what I want to tell you there is honestly nobody in the United States Congress who fights harder for working people and your Congresswoman, Marcy Gabbard. I know that the people in Ohio do not necessarily know a whole lot about Bernie Sanders. Let me just say a few things. School books, from living in a family, growing up in a family that did not have a lot of money. And I remember like it was yesterday, the stress and the struggles that existed in our family about whether we could buy this or do that or do that. That lesson of growing up in a family that struggled economically is a lesson that I have never forgotten, and I will never forget. That we are the richest country in the history of the world, but the vast majority of the people in Ohio and America don't know that because they are working longer hours for low wages while almost all of the new income and wealth is going to the top 1%. So what we are going to do as a nation is create an economy that works for all of us, not just wealthy campaign. Now, what this campaign is about is asking people to think outside of the box, outside of the status quo, outside of the presentation by corporate media about what they think we should be doing. It is to ask some hard questions In the last 30 years, there has been an explosion in technology. Every worker in America today is producing far more than he or she did 20, 30 years ago. Given that reality, why is it that millions of our people are working longer hours for lower wages? Why is it that millions of new jobs are paying less than those same jobs paid 20 years ago? Why is it that over the last 30 years we have seen a massive transfer of wealth from the pockets of working people into the hands of the top 1/10 of 1%? Why is it that today, and listen to this is really pretty shocking. Why is it today that the top 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%? Why is it that the wealthiest 20 people in this country now own more wealth than the bottom 150 million Americans, half our population? Why is it that at a time of a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth? Brothers and sisters, together we are going to change that. That works for workers, that works for our children, that works for seniors, that works for veterans, and not just works for the top 1%. Secretary Clinton and I have a whole lot of differences in terms of our views, in terms of our votes, in terms of the positions that we have taken over many, many years. I want to talk about one, which is of enormous consequence to the workers in Ohio and, in fact, throughout this country. When I was first elected to the United States Senate in the early 1990s, the issue of NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, surfaced. And what corporate America and what the Republicans and what some of the Democrats were saying, this is going to be a great agreement, going to create all kinds of jobs in America. I didn't believe that for 1 second. And in fact, in the early 1990s, I was on the picket lines in opposition to NAFTA. Years later, I opposed an even worse trade agreement, permanent global trade relations with China. You didn't need a PhD in economics to understand that a trade agreement written by corporate America was designed to force American workers to compete against desperately poor people all over the world. And in my view, American workers should not have to compete against people making pennies an hour. And the results of NAFTA, the results of the trade agreement with China, is that this country has lost millions of decent paying jobs. Communities around this country here in the Midwest, in Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, have been devastated. Since 2001, this country has lost almost 60,000 factories. 60,000 factories. And many of the jobs that were lost were good-paying jobs, union jobs, jobs with health care, decent benefits. And when workers lost those jobs, they were forced, in many instances, to take jobs that pay half the wages and often without any benefits at all. And one of the major differences between Secretary Clinton and myself is she supported virtually all of those disastrous trade agreements I opposed. All of those. And I think that history will recall that my vote was the right vote. Her support for those trade agreements was absolutely wrong and devastating. I want to tell you a brief story. In the early 1990s, I went with a congressional delegation to the Maquiladora area in Mexico. That's a region in Mexico where companies, American companies, European companies are able to exist and put factories in a tax-free zone. I went to visit those factories, and what I saw in Mexico were factories that were owned by major American corporations, some European corporations, state-of-the-art, beautiful factories in the early 1990s. And I said, I want to go out, I want to visit the workers in those factories. I want to go to their homes and talk to them. The only problem was I couldn't go to the homes of some of those workers because those workers were not living in homes, they were living in cardboard shacks, drinking filthy water. So what those trade agreements were about are throwing American workers out on the street and exploiting ruthlessly Mexican workers. I've got a message for corporate America, and that is, you want us to purchase your products. Every night you have